or should sex last?
Yeah, I think that's actually a really good question. And there's a lot of myths and a lot of truths and a lot of different information on this. So I'm very excited to jump in.
Well, let's answer the question first. How long does sex, on average, actually last?
Okay, tell us.
Well, the average, which means that it ends with the male part ejaculating, is around 5 to 7 minutes.
Okay.
Now, when surveyed what is the desired amount of time for how long sex should last, and therapists came back with that on average it should be around 10 to 15 minutes.
Okay.
And when then surveyed asking specifically women how long the active sex should last, it was that 25 minutes was kind of like the ideal, but like 15 to 25, something like that.
Okay. So let's talk about a little bit what happens when bodies start to move together, and in the initial 5 to 7 minutes, what's going on in the nervous system, in the hormones, and even in sensation. Because I know in a female body, if I'm not even warmed up, and the main act is the penetrative act, 5 minutes for me would barely bring my pleasure system online.
Well, so what happens a lot of times then in those first 5 minutes is that the bodies are actually relaxing from a lot of kind of tension from the anticipation, which then allows for then sex to kind of naturally unfurl into lots of different layers of pleasure and sensation. Now, what normally happens, the reason why sex a lot of times will end between those 5 to 7 minutes is because there is so much tension between the bodies and the nervous systems don't get to calibrate, that the tension ends up causing the person on the receiving side to tighten up, normally feel some pain, or not really be able to relax and feel much at all. And the person that is then entering is normally overly excited, which then causes them to either lose the erection because just loss of the erection, or to ejaculate very quickly, and then the sex act ends. Now, premature ejaculation, technically, if you've lasted 5 to 7 minutes, it's not considered that.
Yes.
Some definitions will be, well, if it happens before you want it to.
Yes.
But the technical definition
Ejaculatory choice.
Yes, exactly. So we're going to talk about that, because technically premature ejaculation, even if it happens accidentally at that 5 to 7 minutes, it wouldn't count. But we've noticed, though, that when bodies instead start to become entrained and used to one another and synchronized, all of a sudden now a sexual act can even go way beyond the 15 to 25 minute mark, which the reason why most people are saying that they don't want to go beyond the 15 to 25 minute mark is because of friction, meaning that there's a lot of banging that's happened, and the person either starts to physically feel pain, or they start to numb out, or you become bored, which essentially boredom is the psychological component to not feeling much sensation.
Right. I also think...
also can be angry too if you're getting banged into for a long time.
Yeah, or just fear, those other things. I think for extending, like if you took into consideration what we talked about in the episode around the art of penetration, that can take a half hour to just do all those things.
Yes.
Just the entering part. So there is ways of extending lovemaking so that it's quite delicious. But anyways, we'll go back to the normative friction sex experience for the majority.
Which is kind of what you see inside of porn, and that has a tendency to focus on one person on the receiving side being very tight or squeezing to create more sensation, and the other person, whereas the one person on the receiving side should be really small and tight, the other person on the giving side needs to be big, harder, and move faster to create this kind of friction like fire sensation in the body.
We also heard from many different doctors and therapists that the normal description of good sex for women is that it doesn't hurt. So not only are we having a small timeline, now, okay, occasionally in life quickies are important and necessary. I think we should do an episode on quickies. And lasting 25 minutes for, say, people who have children could be like an ideal length of time, just because they are tired, they've got a lot of things to do, and they don't have time for a 3-hour.
But then again, it's ending because you're wanting it to,
Yes.
not ending because you either have to get the person with the penis to ejaculate, or because it's like, oh, this is hurting now.
So I think what's important, the distinction that I'd like to make in this episode, it's the quality of the sex versus quantity, and versus like how long it has to be. So if you have extremely delicious connected quickie, can leave you desiring more, your whole system lit up. I mean, I think it's amazing when you can have that kind of fire, and then you go back into your work day and you're all juicy and you're thinking about the person when you can, and yeah, it just can charge the relationship. Yes. Instead of like feel like, okay, I did my duty, now I don't need to think about this for a while.
So if you answer the question then directly from that perspective, how long does or should sex last, then it's, well, 1, as long as it's pleasurable.
Yes.
And 2, it should be as leaving you at a place, I'm not going to say always, but a lot of times leaving you at a place where you're actually wanting more.
Yes. Yes. And that's the quality of the sex.
So now, you're both satisfied, like, oh, I've gotten what I want, this is really good. But as opposed to like, okay, now I'm not going to want it for a week. It's like, oh, and I could have more, and so that your body stays open and desirous.
And in fact, I'm kind of pro creating that, which is in the other episode I mentioned soft entry, hard exit of the old Taoist saying.
Yes.
So being able to exit hard means you finish before you finish.
Yes. In other words, it's stopping when the both of you want to,
yes.
Not just has the person ejaculated, Jen.
Exactly.
So what is that like then? Can you maybe tell a little bit about this? You talk about a lot of times this relaxed arousal state. So if you're ending sex where you're still hard, doesn't that just mean you're both just going to be really irritated and agitated because you didn't like relieve yourself, or one person didn't relieve themselves?
So in Chinese medicine, the heart, when it's, say, contracted or closed, creates impatience.
So this could be like maybe you're emotionally not available.
Exactly.
It also could mean physically, like you're guarding.
Yeah, you guarding.
With your shoulders rolled
Or you haven't intentionally chosen to breathe and expand, open this area. You also have hastiness, so you're in a rush to get something done with.
Yes.
So impatience, hastiness, and then even can go into apathy. Those are signs that the heart center is
closed.
It's not properly activated,
yes.
Let's call it that way. So if you're having a really quality quickie, part of quality sex is to also open your chest, open your lungs, let yourself feel and sense into that heart space. It doesn't have to mean that this is your forever and ever person. If you have a lover or multiple lovers, or you're just having a fun little shindig here and there, or it could be your forever person. But whatever the case, a lot of times we're having disconnected sex, meaning it's just the genitals coming together, and we're not actually understanding that the heart fire, the energy of an open, enthusiastic, joyful, felt state is actually fueling the genitals. And that kind of fuel is the big fire, and that actually can extend and empower, like the potency of an erection, for example. It can extend and engorge the vulva far more when the heart is open. It can allow for the cervix to participate more in the sexual act as well when the heart is more available, let's say, that way. So how do we activate that?
To join us for the complete and explicit version of this podcast, just simply upgrade your membership and you'll get instant access.